Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, State Farm, and WeatherTech. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and hello, everyone, and welcome to MotorWeek podcast number 167. We're coming to you from Studio C at MotorWeek World Headquarters in Owings Mills, Maryland, around our... Did we ever figure out what this table was shaped like?
Keystone.
Sort of a keystone table.
Yeah, or a lazy triangle.
Are the premier members of the MotorWeek staff that are going to participate today, starting with primo number one, our writer-producer Brian Robinson.
Hello, Mr. Davis.
Our road test producer Ben Davis.
Hey, guys.
No relation. Online content coordinator Greg Carlos.
Hey, hey.
And our video producer editor Joe Ligo.
Hi.
And Joe is basically also the producer for the podcast today.
Yes, blame it on me.
Yeah, not yet. Wait till it's over. Okay, we've got lots to cover. We've got a lightning round, viewer questions, cars and vehicles, and in this case, start off with a comparison test. Those of you that watch the show know that from time to time we do comparison tests jointly with Cars.com, and we've just completed one. Compact SUV comparison. Brian Robinson, tell us what transpired.
So, small compact crossovers are
Hot
pretty
market.
much the market these days. So there was a huge amount available. So to come up with this test, we took the winner from last time, which was the Ford Escape, the best seller in the segment, which is currently the Nissan Rogue, or was at the time, and then everything that had been updated for 17. And so that left us with the Equinox, Rogue, Compass, Escape, Mazda CX-5, Honda CR-V, and Volkswagen Tiguan. I guess no huge surprises on this. The Mazda CX-5, much improved. Ended up finishing third. I maybe would have thought it would have been a little higher. It wins a lot of other comparisons based on its, it's fun to drive and handling characteristics. But then ours, it typically doesn't do as well just because it's noisy. And the interior is not as nice, but with the new CX-5, interior is way
Big
nicer.
improvement.
Yeah. But anyway, without further ado, Volkswagen Tiguan was the winner, just by 2 points over the CR-V, which, of course, going into this was our most recently awarded best small SUV. I guess the big reason is just the space inside. I mean, it's more like mid-size inside.
Is it all the back seat that everybody got crazy about because it's stretched?
Back seat and cargo area both are bigger than everybody else, but mostly just because of the back seat. Yeah.
And of that entire crew, Tiguan's the only one where you can get a third row, right?
There are others in the segment, but of the ones we had there, that's correct. That was the only one.
Curious now,
Yes.
Of course, Volkswagens have a reputation for handling very well, too. The Tiguan does handle very well. So did it still sort of give you that kind of fun to drive experience that you talked about the CX-5? Is it still an SUV for somebody that likes to drive?
It's close. It's not as fun as the CX-5.
Heavier, maybe?
The Tiguan originally, last gen, was super small and very fun to drive, but similar to what they did with the Passat, they just made it bigger and cheaper, more American. And I wouldn't say it's as fun to drive as the CX-5, but still fun.
I got to ask you about two that didn't finish in the top four.
Yes.
The number 4 was the Ford Escape, but then you also had Equinox, Rogue, and Compass. Okay, Rogue was first last time, didn't even finish in the top.
Escape was first.
I'm sorry, Escape was first last time, finished fourth. Rogue is the best seller. Equinox is all new. Jeep Compass is, of course, all new. So where did they fall short?
I would say the Escape didn't really do anything different, just everything got a little bit better. It's a little cramped inside compared to the others.
Just shows how fast the market's moving.
Equinox was the only one that was front-wheel drive, and it had the 2-liter engine upgrade, which had a lot of power, but all you do is as soon as you step on the gas, it spins the wheels, and then traction control shuts you down.
So it's a knife and a gunfight.
So, yeah, and the interior, I mean, despite all the stretches they've made recently, the interior just isn't close to half of these, especially the CX-5. Rogue, they're a big seller mostly because of incentives and fleet sales, so it's fun to drive, and it's also roomy as well, but just overall quality, I don't think measures up to the rest. And Jeep Compass, Obviously, if you want to off-road, that's the one to pick, but that wasn't part of our criteria. It's very noisy, very slow, not the most comfortable out there. So.
Hey, around the table, what do you think of these picks or this particular order with Tiguan, Honda, CX-5, and Escape? Agree, disagree, or?
It's curious that, infotainment's a large part of my criteria these days. So Tiguan, love the infotainment in that. I wouldn't have been surprised if CX-5 edged out CR-V just for infotainment because, the CX-5 infotainment is pretty awesome.
Yeah,
And
Mazda, I like
is
Mazda's system. I don't
Honda's
care
getting
for
better.
Hondas.
It's getting better, though. But I don't know.
Greg?
Weird criteria for me.
I can't really argue with the Tiguan. I think we were all really pleased with that one. And to me, I think that has a good value in terms of, you get a really premium feeling SUV, and it's really not that much more expensive than others in the segment. I don't know what the
It was
price
actually, it was actually $2,000 cheaper than everything else.
Yeah,
They're
so-
underpricing the market.
That
right
was
now.
what I was most shocked by, and that's probably what I would imagine your two guest drivers probably felt the same way. Driving, the CX-5 to me, it is a better driving SUV. Or what are we calling these now? Crossovers? Whatever.
Actually, interchangeable
This
names.
one, yeah.
They're SUVs, but they're also crossovers.
But the Tiguan was also good. I remember the Tiguan had lighter steering. The CX-5 had super heavy steering. So, you associate heavy steering with something that drives better, but that's not necessarily the case in my opinion. I actually got kind of tired of the CX-5 as I remember.
I was actually put off by the fact that Tiguan steering was so light too, but the vehicle was very agile for the fact, even though it was long and weighed quite a bit. So, yeah, you got used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I edited the segment, which is on, I think it's on air right now, and it'll be on YouTube soon if it's not already. And the one thing was mentioned was the CX-5's interior, and watching the video, I thought, wow, that really is it stands out from the other ones, I thought.
They've done a good job.
It definitely looked more upmarket than what I
Yeah,
typically
it's borderline
thought.
luxury, similar to what they do with the CX-9.
Yeah,
A lot of the
so
same
I
surfaces.
definitely agreed with the thoughts on that, at least on the interiors, I thought.
And if you need the full details and a rundown, go over to the cars.com website. They've got all the details on that and all the other comparison tests we've done with them. And for the last, I've lost track, for years now. Let's move on to our next vehicle, also an SUV, although certainly one of a different color, the 2018 Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT Trackhawk.
Booyah.
Greg, it's all yours. Well, maybe for those few human beings that have never heard of a Trackhawk, what is it?
Yeah, talk about an all-American SUV. Well, it's basically, it's a Grand Cherokee, as you can tell from the name, but they took the Hellcat engine, which is the 6.2-liter supercharged Hemi, and they threw it in there. Now, they had to do a lot of working to get it in there because the Grand Cherokee is a much different vehicle than, say, the Charger or the Challenger. You still need some sophistication in there, whereas if you're buying a Charger or Challenger, you just want, like, raw sound
You want
and
the motor.
power. Right.
Yeah.
So, and you get all the horsepower. You lose a little bit of torque because they did some reworking of the exhaust manifold, again, to try and keep it somewhat civilized. You're still getting a ton of supercharger whine. Great exhaust note. I found that it was actually quite comfortable on the highway. In comfort mode, I actually thought they dialed in a little bit too much laziness, I guess maybe is what I could say. I kind of just kept it in sport mode, and that seemed to be the best driving mode for most of my driving. Got to drive it on the track, and the track we were on had hundreds of feet in elevation change. And basically 700 horsepower, it flattens the whole track. It doesn't matter if you miss you lose momentum, the horsepower makes up for it. But it's still an SUV, so you can feel it's still a bit soft. As stiff as the suspension can be, it's still soft on a racetrack. And the steering was a little bit vague compared to like maybe a Cayenne or something like that. But still pretty spectacular. Really it's for 0 to 60 times. And when you combine 700 horsepower with all-wheel drive, you get a pretty solid launch. I think I got it in 3.5 with launch control. over and over again.
Like the first time you did it.
Yeah, first time, and then everybody else who was doing it was pretty much coming down at the same time. So,
On the open road, if you were lucky enough to buy something like this and you had to drive it every day, benign? Do you on the highway? Is it one of those things that until you really get in it, you don't know what you've got?
I thought it was just fine on the highway. I mean, it's not too much to handle. Again, the all-wheel drive kind of helps. If you do get into the throttle to pass somebody, you're not going to end up in the wall or something like that, which was a real possibility with the Charger or the Challenger. But this thing, it was soft when it had to be, and if you really wanted to be fast and furious, that was kind of a lame.
How would you compare to like the AMG stuff or M stuff?
The AMG and the M stuff are more hardcore. It seems like they are like much stiffer than this felt. Like an AMG and an M, those are like probably a step higher than the Trackhawk.
But they're also harsher riding.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. It's
probably
it's
50
harder to
grand
find more of a comfort zone in those. And this thing, while it may not do as well on a road course, it's a lot more comfortable to get to the road course.
Yeah, it's crazy loud.
It's loud for
It's
sure.
got
Yeah.
that is such a great sounding engine, and I was looking at the footage from the track, and you're right, it's just like hard into a corner and stop and then out of the
Right.
car.
Just like you-
Well,
It
it's a
goes,
completely
it
different
goes,
sound
it
from in
goes.
front of the car and behind the car. In front of it, all you hear is a supercharger, and as soon as it goes past you, you just get hit with this exhaust note. That's pretty awesome.
Right, it just goes and goes and goes. And I think that they did a good job with the body work. They didn't go too far.
It's not over the top.
Like, I'm sure that there's aftermarket stuff and you can make it look as wild as you want. But I like that they didn't do too much to it. It's still kind of because the Grand Cherokee is a decent looking design to begin with, so I'm glad they didn't mess with it too much.
The key thing when you see one will probably be the yellow brake calipers, because I think that's exclusive to Trackhawks.
I'm not even sure the last time we saw yellow calipers.
I'm gonna paint mine yellow with my Grand Cherokee.
You know, at 87 grand, we've caught some flack about calling it almost a bargain, but really, for what it is, what else could touch it?
Yeah, $1 per horsepower. I mean, it's pretty cheap.
Yeah, especially
Relatively.
when you look at some of the stuff that we test, that the M's and the AMGs that are six figures.
How is it that Fiat Chrysler can get away with making stuff like this? Like
They have to sell a lot of stuff on the other end, or else basically pay a lot of penalties.
Yeah, like I'm just curious, not even from a regulation standpoint, but just the fact that there's a commercial viability of being able to build these awesome cars and Jeeps and SUVs
Oh,
and the
please.
Hellcats. Just,
Fortunately, we haven't had anybody come in and limit how much power we can put in a car yet, although I'm sure there's a lot of people that would like to do that.
so it's just nuts because
As long as it stops and handles and goes.
Yeah,
what the heck?
if 10 years ago somebody would have told me that you'd be able to buy a 700 horsepower Grand Cherokee, I just
10 years ago, nobody thought you could still buy a V8.
Right? Yeah, it just seems nuts. But I'm not complaining.
But it does show,
it's
actually,
cool.
when you look at this particular vehicle's got pretty awful fuel economy stats. But in some ways, they're no worse than they were 20 years ago for a large SUV. But when you
Right.
look at the advances that have been made in internal combustion engines to make them more efficient, it's impressive. And so,
Right.
as they say, there's still a lot of life yet left in these big old Vs.
Yeah.
Benny, the concept bother you? Like it? You're an old hot rod SUV
That's
guy.
true. No, I encourage the concept.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next one. A car that I will admit, when I saw it at the auto show, absolutely knocked me out. The 2018 Lexus LS 500, the new flagship for Lexus, coming at a time when sedans basically are being displaced rapidly by luxury SUVs. I thought it was one of the most striking cars I'd ever seen. Right now, there's no 8, which the car was always famous for. It's a 3.5 twin-turbo V6, although the rumor is there's a small 8 coming. Is it a fitting flagship, and is it really going to stop this tidal wave, or is it just going to kind of be, hey, if you're there and you want a sedan at the top of the market, you can buy it? Is it a decent rival for the S-Class? What do you think?
I went on the event. yeah, I do think there is. I do think they're making steps to make it a viable option over an SUV. For instance, they're leaning more towards a sport tune ride versus a flagship luxury car ride.
Also following what Lexus has been doing with their other cars.
Yeah, because let's face it, I mean, there's really not much difference ride-wise between a luxury sedan and an SUV. They seem to ride the same these days as a blurred line. So you got that going for it. Kind of a unique look, inside and out. Super comfortable. It did everything right. 10-speed auto. There was no turbo lag in the new 3.5-liter twin turbo. There was, however, with all those gears. It didn't like going from casual to aggressive without a couple seconds of thinking what gear to put you in. But and it might have been a little rigid for downtown or busted up or side roads and stuff like that, suspension-wise. But all in all, if you need a sedan over an SUV, it's definitely worth your while to check it out.
Did you feel prestigious driving it?
No, I didn't.
Well, do you think that's just because you're jaded, or do you think that says something about
I think maybe because
the
it
car?
looked too close. It didn't. It looked very. It had the same design language as the Camry, for instance, that I just recently drove. It didn't. It looked too unique on its own in that aspect. Certainly, when I drove the LC, though, I felt like I was driving something super special.
Yeah, that was the question I had. I mean, they made a big deal about that being their new flagship. Is this still considered the flagship, or?
Yeah, I think it is.
I believe so. I did hear language to that point, but yeah, I think I would adopt the LC as my
It
flagship.
seems to be much more
the L-
aspirational than the LS.
Which
the
I'm
LC is what, maybe a halo car, and then this is a flagship. I mean, and then you're starting to split hairs and
Well, they don't
define the
they don't
vehicles.
traditionally use a coupe as a flagship car.
Yes.
I'm surprised.
Only because you probably can't have it chauffeur driven and get in the back seat easy.
Right.
Do you think the LC is going to get this 3.5-liter eventually?
I think they probably will. I'm frankly surprised they went this route and didn't take the 8 from the LC and put it in it. But
I'm
the
surprised
word is what's coming is an all new, smaller engine and much more efficient.
I'm surprised they doubled down on the Lexus grille shape, because Acura kind of jettisoned their old front end language and said, we're not going to do anything too wild.
Yeah,
and then Lexus
but
says,
the
we're
Lexus-
going to get more wild. And
Yeah,
really,
I actually
But I
think
li-
it works on this car.
I
I
like
don't
it.
like the Lexus front end in general, but I actually thought this car was okay.
I think I agree with you. I think this is the first time I've seen a Lexus with that kind of like dark hourglass or
Yeah.
whatever it's called, where it really, they kind of owned it. They just, like I said, they doubled down on it. And they said, we're not going to give up on this. We're going to do something really kind of wild.
I always kind of
like
liked it. I always liked it.
Do you think they should keep trying to jam performance down our throats, or embrace the old Lexus of uber comfort? And I'm not sure that this strategy they have now it works, because they never seem to really perform that well, and then you don't have the comfort that you used to have, and then you're wondering why you have a Lexus.
That's a good idea. I mean, that's a good point. So instead of chasing Audi and BMW, just bring it back to something like Genesis.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that would be better. But
So
what do you think?
Where everything's an F Sport version, and you're saying like that's kind of ruining the.
Yeah, I don't know about ruining. I'm not sure it's a smart strategy.
I never quite understood the strategy anyway. It's like they had such an incredible clientele that liked what they were doing. They just decided, I guess they were too old and they wanted the younger people. Well, I don't know. I guess I don't know how well it's worked.
That's a good point. Yeah, I don't think a lot of young buzz is around Lexus performance.
Yeah, the cars turn out great, but you never sort of see them. At least the performance models. Okay, well, LS 500. Thanks, Ben and everyone. It's time, I guess, for our lightning round. And this is, if you haven't listened to a podcast recently, we've changed the format a little bit. Yeah, what's your problem? What's your problem? Each panelist now gets 30 seconds to weigh in on a trending topic. And when the time is up, Joe will hit the bell. And we'll start to my left. Oil company Shell Rotel recently launched a petition to the White House to make the pickup truck the official vehicle of the United States of America. The company wants to celebrate the achievement of all hardworking Americans by recognizing the truck as the vehicle that helped build America. Should the U.S. have a national vehicle? Is the pickup truck the right choice? And do we care what a European oil company says?
Yeah, really. Thanks for the addendum there.
Okay, who wants to start? Go ahead, Joe.
All
you
right,
like starting
I'll
things.
time myself.
Time yourself.
I agree with John on the whole, European oil company. It's obviously a marketing thing. It's obviously in their best interest to promote the continued use of large vehicles that use a lot of gasoline. So I get that, and they obviously know the U.S. market well. But
where else on earth are big pickup trucks?
Right.
A majority of the vehicles that you see on the road today.
I'd say if the U.S. had a national vehicle, I guess it could unofficially be the pickup, but I don't think it needs any actual government approval signing off. I think.
Why not? We have the official bird.
I've reached my time.
Good argument.
Ben?
I think the 18-wheeler would be a better vehicle.
True story.
That's
good.
good.
Literally made for work. Pickup trucks now can kind of be used for pleasure.
They are.
How many pickup trucks we see now that go for 60, 70 grand?
We just saw the first $100,000 pickup truck at the Texas State Fair.
They might as well single it out as the F-150. That's the best-selling pickup truck, right?
Narrow it down just a little bit. Great.
Yeah, I kind of butted in on that one.
That's all right. Well, we all did.
Yeah, you can take some time away from me, but
that's all right.
I mean, I guess you could argue if you're going to go for a car category like pony car or muscle car, really. I mean, maybe America isn't necessarily as flashy as say like in Italy or like any of the other European countries, maybe minus Germany. So a work truck, a pickup truck, yeah, I could see it. If you're going to say we have to have a truck or something that is an American car, sure, I'll go with the pickup truck.
All right. Mr. Robinson.
I wouldn't say the pickup truck is the vehicle that built America. I think that was more railroads and steamships, right, during the
industrial post-industrial revolution.
So I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure that we need an official vehicle. But if there were one, I mean, that's one thing that we still do right.
Well, of course, I mean, you have to have official everything, just like you have to have holidays for everything. And official, like I just found out today's this month is like Pit Bull Awareness Month or something.
The dog or the artist?
Maybe both. That's a good question.
Mr. Worldwide.
Just any
National Bosses Day is next week, I think.
Oh, well, I think that.
All right. Well, let me put my 2 cents worth in.
Please.
The only problem I've got, I think if you had to pick one vehicle, you could certainly argue it's the pickup truck, and it has been for a long time. But when you pick a national something like that, it's usually something that should be timeless. And who's to say 20 years from now these won't fall out of favor and everybody will be driving some other? Well, suppose we make the electric car the official vehicle of the United States.
Amazon drones.
I don't think we need it, but it's an interesting idea, and I'm glad they brought it up and gave us a chance to talk about it. It's cool.
Mail truck.
Mail truck. There you go. Or UPS.
Cheap.
Yeah.
Viewer question time. We've got 2 questions that are similar, and they have to do with tires. The first one is, what is the best device to put air in tires at home? And that's from Christine. Well, Gary asks, what's a good type of tire gauge? I always check my tires, but some gauges vary 4 to 5 pounds. So I assume air in my tires is talking about some kind of an air pump or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, yeah. For somebody who doesn't have a fully outfitted garage, what's the best way to go on that? How much money do you spend?
Just go down to the gas station and put 50 cents in the air
But this is
compressor.
the question is at home. The plug-in-the-wall inflator, no doubt. And you can get one for like $30, $50.
Yeah,
easy.
and they're perfectly adequate. The only big question is what Pat Koss is always talking about is the moisture. Now, I don't know. I don't have one. But do any of those little air pumps that have a canister built into them, do any of those have any way to capture the moisture? Because that's the big issue.
Yeah, I know like air compressors. My dad has like a 5-horsepower air compressor, which is more – it's not professional level, but it's probably too much for the regular home consumer.
True.
But it does have a water release valve. When condensation builds up in the tank, every 6 months you're supposed to let the water out of the tank. But I'd say you can get a $100 to $200 1 or 2 horsepower worksite air compressor that's more than enough to pump up tires. You can also use it to blow debris and stuff out from under the hood and clean out your garage. I think if I was buying an air compressor, that's what I'd do.
What would you call that?
I guess a worksite air compressor, a little 1 horsepower, 2 horsepower,
electric.
Yes, electric air compressor that maybe has a maximum of 120 psi.
They're awesome to have, don't get me wrong, but that's assuming they have a garage to keep it in, where as an inflator, it doesn't store air in a tank. It simply
It's just a pump.
pumps it right out the hose, exactly. So you wouldn't have to worry about moisture and something like that. So it all depends on what kind of
I've gotten by
room
so
you
many
have.
years with a combination of a little 12-volt one that I can carry on trips,
Yeah.
plug in the cigarette lighter, and a little bit stronger, 110-volt plug-in at home. And
Yeah, bring a book because it takes a little while
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
10
Just the
pounds down.
old-fashioned
But
bicycle tire and physical pump.
Like Looney Tunes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're feeling bad about your physique, go
Brian?
ahead and pump it up.
can you comment?
I got nothing to add.
Well, what about
Just envisioning Greg
tire
pumping
gauge?
up his tires.
Before we went on the air, there seemed to be a divide between digital tire gauges and the old round, well, not old round, but a good round tire gauge.
You
I
said
didn't hear
dial,
any-
digital, or
dial,
stick.
digital, or stick. I don't think anybody would pick stick as the best. That's
No,
probably the
'cause
least accurate.
what always
I do like
happened
sticks,
to us is my dad had like 5 of them, and they were all bent. And so it would always get stuck. Everything said 30 PSI.
But
and so you'd
they're
fill it
great
up
to have around to know if you've got any air in the tire.
True.
And if
I once I switched to dial, I never went back. I got like a spring-loaded dial one where you can see the PSI. It's got a big clear gauge. It's got a release. You can let air out with it still on the valve. I love it. I'll never go back to the stick ones. I might keep a stick one in the car for emergencies, but I would never use that as my main gauge.
It depends on how much money you spend on your stick too, because I've had some pretty accurate sticks that I'm
So
very
have I.
fond of. So I don't think it's so much in my opinion, the type of the gauge is. But if it's a free one, you can't really depend on it. Whatever you spend on it.
Yeah, 15. If you spend $15 on something, it'll be fine. No matter
So
what
if it's
kind
got
it
a
is.
phone number on it,
There-
that's probably not a good gauge.
There's a very interesting survey that Consumer Reports did. They tested a lot of them, and actually they found the most accurate were some of the digital ones, and they weren't that expensive,
Wow.
$10 to $15. However, close behind that were a couple of dial types in the $35 to $50 range that I would say are almost professional. And so they found some really bad and some really good digital ones.
I found the ones built into the air pumps at gas stations are
They're
not very
good.
No, 'cause-
Likewise, the gauges that are built into pumps are usually off, too.
Yeah, so I did a side-by-side, and there was like a difference of 10 PSI.
I wonder how the free air machines at gas stations that are digital, where you just type in the
when it
PSI
cuts
you're
it
going
off.
for. I wonder how accurate those are. I love those.
I've used one, but I didn't go back and check it after it was over with. All I know is that these days with your tire pressure monitoring systems, and some of those don't seem terribly accurate from wheel to wheel, tire pressure certainly is more important now than ever before. Greg, do you have a preference?
I'm a fan of the old-fashioned dial. I've never used the digital just because I'm skeptical. I don't know why. I just always assume that the analog.
Are you afraid of
dial-
technology, Greg?
Yeah.
My problem is when the battery dies, I never take the trouble to replace them.
Right, and it's always like a teeny tiny like hearing aid battery. It never uses like a AA, right?
And sometimes they're made out of plastic. They're really lightweight, and they just don't feel like
Where
they
the
would
good old
hold
dial
up.
type with a hose on it. All right, that's it. I hope Christine and Gary, that helps in your situations. But basically, the best advice is a good tire gauge. Just have several of them around at different places. Put one in the glove box. Always keep one with you. Any rants and raves this week? Anything that has ticked you off about or made you smile as you were driving around?
Oh, I don't know.
Sorry to say,
I
I have
had one
nothing.
I saved from a couple of weeks ago, so I guess I'm going to launch into this one. So bear with me. I love old cars, and I'm in a lot of old
And you're
car
an old
groups.
car guy.
I'm in a lot of old car groups on Facebook, and I see a common complaint that it's hard to get young people into old cars. And then at the same time, I see a lot of them like making fun of young people for not liking the same cars that they do. And so it's like you can't both complain, oh, kids these days don't like cars, but then at the same time make fun of them because they want to drive a different kind of car than you want. I mean, you don't want to drive your dad's car. You want to express yourself through a different kind of automobile. So there, the American muscle guys like all these Honda Civics and all these hatchbacks and stuff.
But isn't it good that the car culture seems to be continuing, even if they're looking at
Right, that's my
adding
point.
bazooka mufflers instead of redoing
doing
a 34
flames
Ford
and
or something.
Kragers, right? And the thing is, I'm sure before them, I'm sure when muscle cars came out, I'm sure that they're the old guys in the car culture at that point in time complained that people weren't rebuilding Willys coupes. I mean, I think the world is big enough for all of us. In the car culture world is big enough for all different kinds of enthusiasts. So and the other thing is, my argument to the muscle car guys is, it is prohibitively expensive for somebody my age to go out and buy a muscle car.
He's only 12.
Yes, exactly, yeah. So I don't have, they want more people to get into the hobby, but then
the
they don't
hobby's
want to part with
expensive.
their cars at any kind of affordable price. And I get that. Like, the cars are worth what they're worth, but it just doesn't seem like that big of a mystery why there aren't people my age getting into muscle cars. They can't afford it, and there's other cars that are more affordable that are what they want to drive.
We've got stuff to do. We don't have an hour to devote to starting our car every morning.
Well, yes, as the owner of an old car, I definitely know that's fuel injection is
I just got to
nice.
get in and go, man. I got stuff to do.
Yeah.
I got texting to do while I'm
Thank
driving.
you, gentlemen.
You don't have time to
I
put
think it's
ether in the carburetor.
This bickering is a good way for us to exit from our MotorWeek podcast number 167. I want to thank everybody around the table: Brian Robinson, Ben Davis, Greg Carlos, and of course you heard Joe there. Joe is also the producer of our podcast. Special thanks to Jim Bigwood, our audio engineer, who always makes sure that we sound a lot more literate than we really are, and for Bob Mixter, who came up with this crazy idea in the first place. I'm John Davis. On behalf of all of us at MotorWeek, thank you very much for listening to our podcast and for catching MotorWeek on your local public television station and also on the Velocity Cable channel. So next time, for all of us at MotorWeek, thanks for listening, watching, and being a part of MotorWeek.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, State Farm, and WeatherTech. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series, each week on your local PBS station.